Madame la Présidente de
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen. We've gathered here because the time has come. The time has come to free the 48 hostages detained by Hamas. The time has come to stop war, the bombing in Gaza, the massacres and the fleeing people. The time has come because there's a pressing urgency everywhere. The time for peace has come because we're just a few moments away from no longer being able to seize peace. This is why we have gathered here today. Some might say it's too late. Others might say it's too early. But one thing is certain. We can no longer wait. In 1947, this assembly decided on the splitting of mandatory Palestine across two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state, thus recognizing the right of each of them to self-determination. The international community granted to the state of Israel at last fulfilling the destiny of this people after millennia of roaming and persecution, and Israel founded a beautiful democracy there. The promise of an Arab state to date remains unfulfilled. Since then, there's been a long path of hope and despair intertwined, which Israelis and Palestinians have gone down, each in their own way. We have walked alongside them, each of us in keeping with our history and our sensibilities. But the truth is that we bear a collective responsibility for, to date, having failed to build just and lasting peace in the Middle East. This is what became evident to us on the 7th of October 2023, when the Israeli people suffered the worst terrorist attack in its history. 1,224 men, women, and children killed, 4,834 men, women, and children injured, 251 men, women, and children taken hostage. The cruelty of Hamas and all those who collaborated in this massacre dumbfounded Israel and astounded the world. The 7th of October remains an open wound for the Israeli soul and for our universal conscience. We condemn it unequivocally because nothing, never, nowhere can justify having recourse to terrorism. Minds go out and hearts go out to the victims and their families. We've expressed our compassion to all Israelis and first and foremost demand for all hostages still held by Hamas to be freed unconditionally. The French paid tribute to the 51 French men and women assassinated on that day and all other victims of October 7th. We will never forget them. Never. Just like we will never stop the existential fight against anti-Semitism. The French people know the sting of terrorism, and our hearts remember the expression of the bonds of brotherhood following the terrorist attacks committed in Paris on the 7th of January 2015, when dozens of foreign leaders were in the ranks of those offering their sympathies, among which the Israeli Prime Minister and the President of the Palestinian Authority. We know that you cannot show weakness in the face of terrorism, but we also know the perils of endless wars. We know that right must always prevail over might. We know from our own history that a universal commitment to peace is the legacy of centuries gone by and the only way towards salvation. And on behalf of our friendship with Israel, our commitment to which has never faltered in the name of our friendship with the Palestinian people, for whom we want the initial promise of the UN Charter to be fulfilled, we want two states living side by side in peace and security to become a reality. However, currently Israel is further extending its military operation in Gaza with the stated objective of destroying Hamas. But there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced, injured, famished, traumatized, Their lives are still being destroyed. Although Hamas has been considerably weakened, and despite the fact that negotiations on a permanent ceasefire are the surest means of ensuring the release of hostages, nothing justifies the ongoing war in Gaza. Nothing. On the contrary, everything compels us to definitively end it, since we didn't do it earlier. We must do this to save lives. The lives of Israeli hostages detained in atrocious conditions, the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians who are tormented by hunger, suffering, the fear of dying, mourning for their loved ones. We must save all lives, because for almost 2 years now, it is the denial of the humanity of the other and the sacrifice of human life which have prevailed. Yes, since the 7th of October, it is the life of the other that is being denied. We've been saying this since the first day of the war in Gaza. A life is a life. I know this because I held in my arms the families of hostages I met in Tel Aviv and in Paris. I'm thinking of the mother of Eata David, a hostage who was famished and displayed. I'm thinking of Nimrod Cohen, a 19-year-old hostage whose father I just met. I also know this because I was at the bedside of the Palestinian victims of Israeli military operations, refugees in Al Arish, women and children. I will never forget the way they looked at me. I know this because I met young people from Gaza who we are hosting in France. I'm thinking of Rida Baroud, who should have been with us today, who continues to bear witness to the distress of her loved ones in Gaza. A life is a life. We are duty-bound, all of us, to protect each other. This duty is indivisible, just as our common humanity is indivisible. There is a solution, a way of breaking the cycle of war and destruction. It lies in the recognition of the other, of his and her legitimacy, humanity, and dignity. We must reopen our eyes and see human faces there where war has deposited the mask of the enemy or the marks of a target. We must recognize that Palestinians and Israelis are living in twin solitude. The solitude of the Israelis following the historic nightmare of the 7th of October 2023, and the solitude of Palestinians. Palestinians at their wits' end in the face of this ceaseless war. The time has come. Because the worst could still come to pass. The sacrifice of more civilians, the expulsion of the people of Gaza to Egypt, the annexation of the West Bank, the death of hostages detained by Hamas, or facts on the ground which could irreversibly change the situation there on the ground. This is why, this is the very reason that today, here in this chamber, we must pave the way for peace, because since July of last year, developments have accelerated, and at this point, we have reason to fear that the Abraham Accords, the Camp David Accords, could be called in question by Israel, and that peace would become impossible for a long time yet in the Middle East. It thus falls to us this historic responsibility. We must do everything within our power to preserve the very possibility of a two-state solution. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. The time has come. This is why, true to the historic commitment of my country to the Middle East, to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, this is why I declare that today France recognizes the state of Palestine.